Senators Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan and Godswill Akpabio. Judge withdraws from Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan's suit after Akpabio's petition. The development puts another spanner in the works of Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan's suit, which she hoped would be promptly resolved to possibly cut short the 6-month suspension on her imposed by the Senate. A judge of the Federal High Court in Abuja on Tuesday recused himself from hearing a suit filed by Kogi Central Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan to challenge his suspension by the Senate. Obiora Egwotu's decision followed a petition from Senate President Godswill Akpabio, who questioned his impartiality in the case. The case was originally scheduled for a hearing, but when the court clerk called it, he said that the case file would be returned to the chief judge for reassignment to another judge. The development puts another spanner in the works of Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan's suit, which she hoped would be promptly resolved to possibly cut short the 6-month suspension imposed on her by the Senate. It is the latest in the series of drawbacks the suit has suffered in within a week, including the judge's March 19th ruling reversing his earlier March 4th order halting the Senate's disciplinary process against her. The suit also faces the prospect of an indefinite adjournment even if it is promptly resigned to another judge, with the Court of Appeal set to hear Mr. Akpabio's application for stay of proceedings of the Federal High Court regarding the suspended senator's case. Mr. Egwotu had previously issued an interim order on March 4th, halting the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions from proceeding with disciplinary action against Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan for allegedly violating Senate rules. The judge gave the restraining injunction before the disciplinary process reached a decision. The judge ordered the Senate Committee to suspend the disciplinary process until the substantive suit was determined. Furthermore, he gave the defendant 72 hours to show cause why an interlocutory injunction should not be granted to stop the Senate from probing Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan without affording her due process, as outlined in the Nigerian Constitution, the Senate Standing Orders 2023, and the Legislative House's Powers and Privileges Act. Mr. Egwotu also permitted substituted service of court processes on the defendants. He ordered that court documents be delivered to the clerk of the National Assembly, pasted within the National Assembly premises, and published in 2 national newspapers. His March 4th rulings were based on an expert application and an affidavit of urgency filed by Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan. AKPABIO'S appeal. Meanwhile, Senate President Akpabio has been challenging the legal proceedings. That Mr. Akpabio filed an application at the Court of Appeal in Abuja on March 20th, seeking to hold the Federal High Court's hearing of Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan's case. He also sought permission to appeal an interlocutory ruling delivered by Mr. Egwotu on March 10th. Mr. Akpabio's legal team, led by Kihind Ogonwumeju, a senior advocate of Nigeria, LSAN, argued that the lower court's decision to hear all pending applications together contradicted established legal principles. Senate President Godswill Akpabio, Senate President Godswill Akpabio. Mr. Akpabio also filed an application for a stay of proceedings before the Federal High Court on the same day, asking it to suspend the hearing of the case pending the appeal. One of the key applications in contention was the Senate's challenge to the March 4th interim injunction, which had stopped the disciplinary process against Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan. The suspended senator had also filed applications for a mandatory injunction and contempt proceedings against Senate officials, accusing them of violating the court's order. There is a need for this honorable court to stay proceedings of the lower court pending the hearing and determination of the appellant/applicant's appeal, to prevent the judgment of this honorable court nugatory, Mr. Akpabio's lawyer wrote in the application filed at the Court of Appeal on March 20th. Setback for Akpoti-Uduaghan's legal challenge. The Federal High Court, on March 19th, a day before Mr. Akpabio's Court of Appeal application, reversed one of its March 4th orders restraining the Senate from going ahead with its disciplinary process against Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan. The court agreed with the Senate's argument that the order was vague and could interfere with legislative powers. The court had originally scheduled March 25th, today, for the hearing of all pending applications, but with Mr. Akpabio's appeal now before the appellate court, the Federal High Court had to postpone its proceedings. This is especially so because the Court of Appeal has also fixed Tuesday for the hearing of Mr. Akpabio's application. Mrs. Akpoti-Uduaghan initiated the case after an altercation with Mr. Akpabio during a February 20th Senate session, where she protested her seating arrangement. The clash led to her referral to the Senate Committee on Ethics, which commenced disciplinary proceedings against her. On March 4, Mr. Akpoti granted her request for an interim injunction, suspending all disciplinary actions against her. Despite the court order, the Senate suspended her on March 6, citing misconduct. In response, she filed a mandatory injunction and contempt proceedings against Senate officials for allegedly flouting the court order. At a March 10 hearing, Mr. Akpoti ruled that all pending applications in the suit would be heard together. Kogi Central Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan at IPU meeting. Kogi Central Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan at IPU meeting. Mr. Akpabio's legal team objected, arguing that this decision violated legal procedure. On March 17, the Senate's lawyer, Chikosolu Ojukwu, also SAN, formally challenged the March 4 interim order, arguing that it lacked clarity and infringed on legislative independence. The Federal High Court, agreeing with this argument, vacated part of the order on March 19. Mr. Akpabio's March 20 appeal seeks an extension of time to apply for leave to challenge the March 10 ruling. His legal team argues that the Federal High Court made an error by deciding to hear all pending applications together. According to an affidavit filed by Mr. Akpabio's senior legislative aide, Toyo Jimmy, the Senate President could not file his appeal within the usual 14-day legal window because of this ruling. His lawyers contend that allowing the Federal High Court to continue hearing the case while an appeal is pending could render the appellate ruling ineffective. The Court of Appeal has now scheduled a hearing on Mr. Akpabio's application for Tuesday, the same day the Federal High Court was set to hear pending applications. If the Court of Appeal proceeds with the case, the lower court may have to defer its hearing. What do you think? Should the courts intervene in Senate disciplinary matters? Drop your comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more breaking news.